Imagine a war where your enemies treat you better than your own country ever could. Discover how German soldiers, expecting cruelty and fear, were stunned by American kindness, democracy, and abundance. Stay till the end to see how these enemies became advocates for the very society that defeated them. On June 4, 1943, at the Norfolk Naval Base in Virginia, the first major group of German prisoners of war set foot on American soil. Among them was Unteroffizier Hermann Böttcher, gripping the railing of the gangplank as his legs shook from the 14-day Atlantic crossing. Through the morning haze, he expected to see hostility or fear. Instead, he saw something entirely unexpected: American dock workers, both white and black, laboring side by side with massive machinery that looked like it belonged to another century. Women in coveralls operated cranes, while children sold newspapers at the gates. Civilians walked casually near enemy uniforms, showing no sign of alarm. Whispering to the man behind him, Böttcher muttered, "Die Spinnen, die Amerikaner, the Americans are crazy." Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. More untold WWII stories are coming your way. Böttcher would later describe this moment in his memoir Behind Barbed Wire, published in Germany in 1952. His account became one of the most detailed records of life as a German POW in America. The Norfolk base itself was overwhelming, sprawling across 4,300 acres, with docks stretching endlessly and cranes unloading dozens of ships at once. In just one morning, the base processed more tonnage than Hamburg could handle in a week. Yet the sheer size wasn't the only shock. What unsettled the prisoners most was the normality around them. Vendors sold coffee and donuts within sight of massive warships, and a brass band played at a nearby war bond rally. For the 2,500 captured veterans of Rommel's Afrika Korps now standing on American soil, this was the first taste of a reality that defied Nazi propaganda. They had been told to expect chaos and fear in America, a land weak and divided. Instead, they found a society so secure in its strength that it allowed civilians to mingle freely near military sites, even while enemy soldiers were present. To the disciplined German military mind, this looked like madness. But in time, it would prove to be something far more dangerous to Nazi ideology than any Allied weapon. Processing began immediately, and here, Böttcher recorded what he called the first impossibility. German doctrine taught that prisoners were either tools to exploit or burdens to minimize, and the Geneva Convention was applied only when convenient. Yet American officers addressed them in fluent German, calmly reading the rules of the Geneva Convention, asking about dietary needs, and ensuring proper registration. According to Red Cross records, even Jewish American soldiers distributed aid packages, offering kosher meals for Jewish prisoners. At first, many Germans thought this was a cruel joke, but it was. For the first time, they were face to face with an enemy that treated them with rights and dignity, something utterly foreign to their military experience. The Norfolk Reception Center was only a temporary stop. Within days, the Germans were loaded onto trains headed west, their destinations carefully concealed. To Hermann Böttcher and his comrades, the journey was almost surreal. Each railcar had bunks, guards offered coffee, and curious American civilians lined the tracks to catch a glimpse of Hitler's soldiers. Some waved mockingly, others simply watched in silence, but what struck the prisoners most was the abundance. Farms stretched endlessly, machinery worked fields larger than many German towns, and even in wartime markets overflowed with goods. Böttcher later recalled that it felt as if America itself was taunting them. Here, war was an inconvenience, not a struggle for survival. Their final destination turned out to be a sprawling POW camp in the heartland of America. The camp, ringed by barbed wire and watchtowers, was strict but not brutal. Unlike the grim images of German stalags, these camps had barracks with heating, clean water, and even organized recreation. German officers expected starvation rations, yet prisoners received meat, bread, and coffee daily, rations equal to what American soldiers ate. They could scarcely believe it. For many, it was their first real meal in weeks. Nazi indoctrination had painted Americans as weak and decadent, but the sheer efficiency of the camp's organization told a different story: discipline without cruelty. Inside the camp, work details were organized almost immediately. German POWs labored in agriculture, lumber, and even canning factories, earning small wages credited to their camp accounts. Though heavily guarded, they were not humiliated. Instead, Americans expected them to work with diligence and even encouraged them to attend classes, lectures, and language courses. Some camps offered art workshops, music rehearsals, and sports tournaments. Böttcher noted that while the barbed wire reminded them of captivity, the cultural opportunities gave them a sense of normality that no German-run POW camp would have ever allowed. The contrast was striking, and it quietly sowed seeds of doubt in their loyalty to Hitler's regime. One of the most shocking discoveries came from the libraries established within the camps. Shelves filled with German classics, American literature, and even banned works like Thomas Mann's novels were freely available. For soldiers raised under a censorship-obsessed dictatorship, this intellectual freedom was almost unthinkable. Reading groups formed, debates broke out, and many prisoners began to rethink the world they thought they understood. As Böttcher would later write, "Behind barbed wire, I tasted freedom for the first time." Camp Hearn in Texas represented a turning point in the German prisoners' perception of America. Spread across 720 acres, the camp was meticulously organized, yet it radiated comfort rather than oppression. Wooden barracks with electric lighting, indoor plumbing, and warm beds greeted the arrivals. Recreation halls buzzed with activity, offering ping pong, musical instruments, and libraries stocked with thousands of books. For German soldiers accustomed to the harsh discipline of their own military, this level of organization, coupled with genuine care, was unprecedented. They began to realize that their understanding of enemy behavior, honed by propaganda, was deeply flawed. Medical inspections at Hearn further challenged their assumptions. German prisoners with wounds received penicillin, a drug scarcely available to their comrades on the front. African American medical personnel, working seamlessly in integrated units, treated injuries with the same skill and attention given to American soldiers. One German officer recorded his astonishment at being drawn for a routine blood test by a black medical technician, a scenario that would have been forbidden under Nazi racial law. For many, the logic of American efficiency and fairness seemed incomprehensible, yet the evidence was everywhere. The camp canteen became a symbol of this strange new world. Prisoners earned small wages for their labor, which allowed them to buy cigarettes, soap, chocolate, and even musical instruments. It was voluntary, yet participation was high, demonstrating that trust and autonomy could replace coercion. At the King Ranch near Kingsville, Texas, POWs worked alongside Mexican-American and African-American laborers in cattle operations. The scale of mechanization, trucks, combines, and even small aircraft astonished them. They witnessed firsthand the effectiveness of cooperation across racial and national lines, directly contradicting Nazi ideology about hierarchy and racial purity. Education at Camp Hearn was equally transformative. The camp library initially held 500 volumes but expanded to over 5,000, including works banned in Nazi Germany. Correspondence courses from Sam Houston State Teachers College offered lessons in English, history, mathematics, and agriculture. Lectures and examinations were conducted by professors who visited monthly. Prisoners began to engage intellectually and socially in ways impossible under the Third Reich. Slowly, the German soldiers' worldview began to shift, their indoctrinated certainties giving way to curiosity and reflection. By observing American society and its routines, the POWs were learning lessons far beyond the battlefield. The social dynamics within Camp Hearn challenged German prisoners' deepest assumptions about authority and hierarchy. Unlike the rigid command structures of the Wehrmacht, prisoners were encouraged to self-govern within the compounds. They elected spokespersons, organized recreational activities, and helped manage their daily routines. To Böttcher and many others, this autonomy was incomprehensible. Nazi doctrine had instilled the belief that enemies must be subdued through fear. Yet here, prisoners found that responsibility and trust fostered discipline and cooperation more effectively than coercion ever could. Racial dynamics added another layer of cognitive dissonance. African American soldiers occasionally served as guards, while Mexican American and black laborers worked side by side with POWs in fields and factories. German soldiers, indoctrinated to believe in racial superiority, struggled to reconcile this reality. Some requested transfers rather than submit to black authority, only to have their requests denied. Yet over time, observation of efficiency, skill, and mutual respect in these mixed crews eroded the racial prejudices instilled by years of Nazi propaganda. They saw firsthand that productivity and cooperation were not tied to race. American civilians also played a critical role in reshaping German perceptions. In nearby towns, POWs shopped in stores, attended church services, and interacted with local residents. Christmas 1943, in particular, left a profound impression. Entire communities mobilized to provide gifts, decorations, and festive meals. Churches performed services in German, choirs learned carols phonetically, and local veterans contributed generously. For soldiers conditioned to expect hatred and punishment from every encounter, this kindness was deeply unsettling. They could not label it weakness. It reflected confidence, security, and a strength rooted in shared humanity. Work programs reinforced these lessons. German POWs labored in agriculture, factories, and canneries under conditions of safety, fairness, and remuneration. At the Hearn cotton oil mill, prisoners observed industrial processes that far outpaced European standards, yet workers took regular breaks, ate meals, and enjoyed small comforts. Supervision emphasized guidance rather than intimidation. These experiences highlighted a fundamental difference. In America, motivation and respect produced efficiency, while coercion and fear were secondary. The cumulative effect of these daily interactions was transformative, slowly dismantling ideological certainties that had taken years to instill. Education and intellectual engagement at Camp Hearn played a pivotal role in transforming German prisoners. Initially skeptical, many soldiers began attending voluntary classes, reading books from the library, and participating in discussions. Works by banned German authors, as well as texts on democracy, history, and science, exposed them to ideas they had been forbidden to explore. These educational programs encouraged critical thinking, allowing prisoners to question the propaganda that had shaped their worldview for years. Slowly, curiosity replaced indoctrination, and ideological rigidity began to soften under the weight of knowledge. The camp newspaper, Der Spiegel, became another tool of transformation. Early editions mirrored Nazi propaganda, but over time, articles shifted toward discussion, debate, and reflection. Prisoners contributed essays, commentaries, and creative work, fostering an environment where opinions could be expressed freely. Editors and discussion leaders, often anti-Nazi prisoners, guided these conversations, subtly steering their peers toward democratic ideals. The act of reading, writing, and debating ideas within a controlled environment nurtured a sense of personal responsibility and moral reasoning previously suppressed by military indoctrination. Prisoner labor programs also reinforced lessons learned in education. At farms, ranches, and industrial plants, POWs worked alongside Americans under humane supervision. The stark contrast to forced labor experiences in Germany, where scarcity, punishment, and fear dominated, was impossible to ignore. At the King Ranch, for example, German POWs observed large-scale mechanization, aerial surveys, and coordinated operations that made traditional European methods appear antiquated. Experiencing efficiency and cooperation firsthand, prisoners began to internalize the benefits of teamwork, innovation, and shared responsibility, seeing that human dignity and productivity could coexist. Perhaps the most profound shift occurred through exposure to American society beyond the camp gates. Soldiers observed townspeople engaging in everyday life, celebrating holidays, and openly discussing politics, often in ways that contradicted Nazi ideology. Women worked in defense plants and drove trucks, while children attended schools with diverse classmates. Civilians treated prisoners with respect and sometimes genuine warmth, fostering a sense of trust previously unimaginable. These experiences cumulatively created a cognitive dissonance so powerful that many soldiers reconsidered their loyalty to Nazi ideology, recognizing that the enemy they had been trained to despise could, in fact, embody the principles of fairness, democracy, and humane treatment. The American approach to daily life at the camps challenged German soldiers' preconceptions of military discipline and societal control. Guards treated prisoners with fairness and respect, maintaining order not through fear but through trust. Violations of rules were addressed calmly and systematically, rather than through humiliation or violence. Prisoners quickly noticed the stark contrast to their experiences in German camps, where punishment was immediate, harsh, and often arbitrary. This exposure to disciplined freedom slowly reshaped their understanding of authority and responsibility, revealing that order could exist alongside humanity. Cultural exposure further deepened the transformation. POWs attended public events, concerts, and church services, witnessing music, art, and celebrations that celebrated life rather than glorifying militarism. German soldiers, previously immersed in propaganda that condemned jazz, swing, and degenerate art, were struck by the vibrancy and creativity of American society. These experiences fostered appreciation and curiosity, challenging their ideological assumptions. The communal nature of these events demonstrated cooperation and mutual respect, illustrating that society could function effectively without rigid authoritarian control. Nutrition and medical care offered yet another source of astonishment. Prisoners received ample food, carefully prepared meals, and supplements like penicillin, previously rare on the European battlefield. Hospital facilities were modern and well-equipped, with African American and white medical personnel working together seamlessly. German POWs who had witnessed starvation and inadequate care at home were astounded by the provision and attention given to enemy soldiers. Such treatment conveyed a message beyond mere physical well-being. It exemplified a society that valued life, fairness, and moral responsibility, even toward former adversaries. Work assignments continued to demonstrate American efficiency and fairness. Prisoners in agriculture, factories, and industrial plants were integrated into operational systems where success depended on cooperation rather than coercion. Supervisors encouraged initiative and rewarded performance, reinforcing the idea that individuals could thrive when treated with respect and given opportunities for responsibility. The contrast to European systems, where fear dominated productivity, was stark. German POWs began to internalize lessons of leadership, collaboration, and human dignity, appreciating that authority could coexist with personal freedom and respect. The psychological impact of American generosity and fairness became increasingly evident over time. Prisoners realized that their expectations of hostility and punishment were unfounded. Small acts of kindness, friendly conversations, distribution of gifts, and respectful treatment gradually eroded deeply ingrained beliefs in the superiority of Nazi ideology. Hermann Böttcher noted in his memoir that witnessing Americans act with confidence, compassion, and civility created a profound sense of cognitive dissonance among prisoners. They were forced to confront the inconsistency between Nazi propaganda and the reality before them. Christmas 1943, at Camp Hearn highlighted this transformation most vividly. Entire communities mobilized to provide gifts, decorations, and festive events for enemy prisoners. Churches performed concerts in German, schools contributed handmade cards, and civic organizations donated food, toys, and clothing. Prisoners were astonished that citizens whose sons were fighting against them would extend such care and goodwill. This experience challenged their understanding of power, morality, and victory. Kindness, not cruelty, was a demonstration of strength, leaving an indelible mark on prisoners' minds and slowly dismantling ideological loyalty. Labor programs continued to reinforce lessons of fairness and cooperation. German POWs working on farms and ranches were exposed to advanced agricultural techniques, mechanized equipment, and integrated work crews. Collaborating with Mexican-American and African-American laborers challenged their racial assumptions and demonstrated that productivity did not rely on racial hierarchy. Prisoners observed efficiency, innovation, and pride in work, often surpassing European expectations of output. These experiences offered tangible evidence that humane treatment and respect for workers could coexist with high productivity. Education and exposure to democratic discourse further solidified ideological shifts. Prisoners attended lectures, participated in discussion groups, and read newspapers presenting multiple perspectives, including criticism of American policies. They witnessed political debate, public dissent, and open critique of leadership, concepts that were alien in the rigid hierarchy of Nazi Germany. Over months, these experiences nurtured critical thinking and personal reflection, fostering an appreciation for the principles of democracy, freedom, and individual responsibility. German POWs increasingly internalized these lessons, recognizing the value of a society based on trust, opportunity, and shared human dignity rather than fear and obedience. The transparency and openness of American society continued to astound German prisoners. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, and conversations offered them unfiltered access to political debates, criticism of military strategies, and civic discourse. Prisoners observed that dissent did not weaken the nation. Instead, it strengthened it. The contrast to totalitarian control in Germany was stark. Hermann Böttcher described how witnessing journalists and comedians openly critique leaders challenged the very foundation of Nazi beliefs that authority must remain unquestioned. Exposure to such freedoms fostered curiosity, reflection, and over time, a growing respect for democratic ideals. Recreational and cultural programs in the camps reinforced these lessons. Concerts, theater performances, and artistic activities allowed prisoners to participate in and appreciate creativity that had been suppressed in Nazi-controlled territories. Camp Concordia, Kansas, became renowned for its art initiatives, where POWs painted murals and performed in orchestras. German soldiers accustomed to propaganda and rigid cultural control marveled at the autonomy and self-expression allowed in these programs. Participation encouraged cooperation, camaraderie, and a sense of individual worth, further weakening ideological indoctrination. Prisoners were also exposed to the practical benefits of American industrial and agricultural efficiency. At the Alcoa aluminum plant in Texas, POWs saw production scales unimaginable in Europe, where resources were scarce and control was centralized. Tasks were performed with a combination of motivation, pride, and innovation rather than coercion. Observing Americans achieving unprecedented productivity while preserving worker dignity challenged Nazi assumptions that fear and discipline were the only drivers of success. Many prisoners began to internalize these lessons, recognizing that humane treatment could coexist with efficiency and achievement. By early 1945, the cumulative effect of education, labor, cultural programs, and exposure to freedom had transformed large numbers of prisoners. Reports noted measurable ideological shifts, with many expressing appreciation for democratic principles and a desire to understand American society more deeply. The rare instances of attempted escape further illustrated the contrast. Prisoners rarely fled from humane conditions, instead seeking to observe and learn from American life. This unique combination of exposure, trust, and opportunity achieved what military defeat alone could not: the gradual, lasting transformation of enemies into informed, capable, and in many cases, sympathetic participants in democratic society. As the war drew to a close, American authorities prepared prisoners for repatriation to a devastated Germany. This preparation went beyond simple logistics. It included vocational training, agricultural education, civil administration courses, and lessons in public health and infrastructure reconstruction. Prisoners were taught practical skills to rebuild their homeland, ensuring that they could return not just as survivors, but as capable contributors to society. Exposure to American efficiency, democratic practices, and humane treatment had instilled knowledge and values that would influence post-war reconstruction. The transformative power of these camps was documented extensively. Reports and surveys conducted after the war found that a majority of returned POWs held favorable views of American democracy. Many supported the Marshall Plan and advocated for German-American cooperation. Former prisoners like Georg Gärtner and Reinhold Pabel chose to remain in America, integrating into society, marrying and raising families. Their experiences illustrate that ideological transformation extended beyond the camps, shaping personal lives, career choices, and cross-cultural understanding. America had not only defeated an enemy militarily, but had won hearts and minds through the demonstration of values and human dignity. This transformation was not limited to ideology. It also affected social and cultural perceptions. German prisoners saw racial integration in action, women exercising authority, and communities participating in civic life with pride and responsibility. They observed a society where freedom and structure coexisted, where dissent was tolerated, and where individuals were trusted to act responsibly. These lessons were internalized and carried back to Germany, influencing governance, education, and community life in the post-war era. The POW experience became a conduit for introducing democratic practices and social norms into a society emerging from totalitarian rule. Ultimately, the story of German prisoners in America stands as one of history's most remarkable examples of peaceful transformation. Exposure to American life, through labor, education, culture, and humane treatment, achieved what force alone could not. Enemies became allies, skeptics became advocates, and individuals were reshaped by witnessing a society confident enough to combine power with mercy. The legacy of these camps extends far beyond the individuals who passed through them. It demonstrates that the greatest victories can be achieved not through destruction, but through humanity, not through hatred, but through understanding, and not through coercion, but through example. The unusual sights German POWs witnessed became the foundation for lasting peace, democratic reconstruction, and transatlantic friendship.